as in costume yesterday.
Any of those
It's like
options.
5 of the girls, they lived down the street from me. They were, so they got in front and they decided they were gonna do the tier and I was like, oh, I could have had my camera, but it was a little too dark.
I'm into the round.
Great.
Like I should send that to you.
Please have a little bit.
That happens, I just walk around saying, wait, it's Halloween?
I guess the judges don't dress up, right?
No.
Thank you. I want to first start out by thanking our town manager, Katie Crosby, and our police chief, Jason Paul, for putting this together. It's certainly a good time for us to kind of go in and see what is going on with public safety with regards to the police department at this time of the year. So this will be our first public safety work session for the year, and probably the last session. So here we are. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Chief Armstrong to give us updates. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. So good afternoon or good evening, whatever everyone we're in, to Mayor and Council, and thank you all for being here. Also Manager Crosby and our staff and our guests. So what I'm going to be talking about this evening is just a high level overview of some of the things, or some of the key things that we've been working on that we've already got accomplished. And so now we're going to look and see how we're doing in those areas, and some of the things that we have pending that we're working on, and just, some of the key issues that we're seeing and that we're dealing with here at the police department. And so just jumping right into it. So first I'm going to talk about personnel update. Now, first I have to clarify this is I'm not talking about every single personnel person or new addition that we've had. There are key individuals that I'm going to be talking about this evening, and the reason that I'm specifying these individuals is because they tie into some of the other topics and issues that I'm going to be talking about specifically. So if any of our staff is watching this, if you don't see me mention you, it's not because I forgot about you, but it's specifically tied into the topics that we're going to be talking about later on in the presentation. So what we're looking at on the screen right here is this is our old organization structure. And so when I got here last year in 2021, this pretty much was how we were organized. And the key areas that I want to focus on right here is this line right here. And this is our division commander line. And so as you can see, when I got here, we were broken up into 3 divisions: administrative division, criminal investigation division, and then the patrol division. And one of the things that we really focused on was that the patrol division commander had all of the patrol officers under their scope and all of the specialized units up under them also. And so where these other 2 commanders had a more realistic span of control, this patrol commander was really burdened with having so many staff and so many functions reported directly to him. And so this is our new organization structure. So after we went through the Baker-Tilly study and some of the recommendations that they had, in addition with some of the things that we were already looking at and had been working on here as an organization, we did restructuring, and we added a special operations commander to our organization structure to have just a better framework of oversight and accountability from the command level. Another big change that we made is we moved the professional standards unit, which was a part of the admin function. We moved that up under the police chief to where everything dealing with professional standards. So that's where our complaints come in, our internal affairs, investigations, all of that stuff reports directly up to the police chief. And so going to highlight the individuals in these roles. And so Captain Justin Rosser, who is here with us. So Captain Rosser was a lieutenant with us when I first got here, and we went through the process, and he was promoted to the rank of captain. And currently Captain Rosser oversees our administrative division inside the police department. And we have Captain Joy Best, who's also here with us. And Captain Best was over the patrol function when we made these moves and changes. And Captain Best was transferred over to the special operations division. So he inherited the new division that we created of having a separate special operations division aside from the patrol division. And Captain Best is who is leading the special operations division. Some of our new additions to the department is Captain Christy Wenzel. And so Captain Wenzel came to us out of Tennessee, and close to a 20-year career in law enforcement thus far. And Captain Wenzel is over the criminal investigations division that we have here. And then Captain Hayes, who wasn't able to join us here this evening, but Captain Hayes is a North Carolina product, and his whole career has been in North Carolina again, right at 19, 20 years of experience that Captain Hayes brings to us. In his last posting, he was a lieutenant for several years with Duke University. And his experience in the state spans from local government in Winston-Salem, and he also served several years as an investigator with the State Bureau of Investigation. So, diverse experience that Captain Hayes brings to us. And Captain Hayes is our patrol commander, so he heads up the patrol division for us now. So in addition to our leadership team and our new leadership team, we're going to talk about some of our other additions from civilian staff that ties directly into some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about later on in the presentation. And so this is Kia Morton. She had a conflict this evening, so she wasn't able to join us. But Kia is our crisis counselor that we hired on. And so, from what was explained to me when I arrived here, that was, kind of council-led initiative of wanting to add that resource to the police department. And so that position was here when I got here, and we finally were able to get Kia hired in that position. And everything that I've seen from Kia thus far is she absolutely is the person that we needed in this role, because she has a lot of passion and a lot of energy behind doing this work. And that's what you need in a person in that role. And we have Megan Simpson, and Megan is here with us this evening. And so Megan is our compliance manager. And so the compliance manager was a newly created position here for us. And really where that position came from is my experience working in Ferguson and being up under a consent decree. We hired a civilian to be our consent decree coordinator, which was the first time that had been done up there. And so the consent decree coordinator that I worked with up there came from the space of civilian oversight of law enforcement. And so some of you may be familiar with an organization called NAPO, which that's the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And so truth be told, if we weren't under a consent decree and I wasn't kind of forced to go down that path, it's probably not a path I would have gone down, because you don't see that in our profession of a civilian coming inside the police department and working, from that lens and working that angle. But what I can say, and what my experience is we made the most progress on our consent decree with the two of us partnering up than the agency had made in all of the years that they had been under before we got there. And so coming here, I really wanted to bring that lens, because I saw the benefit of having a civilian practitioner sitting inside the police department and looking at things, looking at your professional standards from that lens, where they're not looking at things like a career law enforcement person will look at it, even myself. It's a different mindset and a different lens that they look at things from. And I really saw the benefit of that in my experience in Ferguson. And so, I wanted to create that position here to where, that really gives us an advantage when we look at what our internal accountability is from an organization and how we go about holding ourselves accountable and really just making sure that what we're doing, the things that we put in policy and the words that we have on paper just aren't words in paper. And we're really auditing ourselves and really looking deep within ourselves to make sure that we're doing everything that we say we're doing, and we can show proof and evidence and documentation that that's the case. And lastly, I want to highlight Pastor Kevin O'Brien, who has recently been sworn in as our volunteer chaplain for the organization. And so when I arrived here, I heard that we had a chaplain program, some time ago, and I believe the individual that was running that program moved away. And so it had been vacant ever since. And so we started looking at this. I've had a chaplain program, every organization that I've worked in, so I definitely understand the value of it. But when I looked at the policy that we had in place for the chaplain program, it wasn't as expansive as I felt it needed to be and what I would have wanted to see out of the chaplain program. And so we had some work to do on getting the policy, updated and changed, and really adding some stuff in there to where when we talk about, what the chaplain's role is, and more importantly, not just having one chaplain, but having a team of chaplains. And as I get further into the presentation, we'll kind of highlight, the benefits of that and what we're looking to do with that program. But we got the policies and everything finally squared away, and Pastor O'Brien was chomping at the bit to come be a part of our team here and support us in that role. He's with Apex Baptist Church. And just the short time that he's been on in that role, we've been able to utilize him, and it's been very beneficial, for staff and for the community with some of the stuff that he brings and just his own background and approach in this space. And so we're really looking to do some good things with that. And so those are some of, like I said, not more important than any other positions that we brought in, but, more specific to some of the things that, are highlighted on the agenda for this evening, and some of the people that are doing some of the work that I'm going to be talking.
Jason, can you go back for just a second with the chaplain program? Can you speak to interfaith and then those who are not associated with a religion?
Yes, and so, when it comes to interfaith, and part of what we're looking to build out, when I say building out a team, is to cover exactly that, is to make sure that we have as diverse representation on our chaplain team and in our chaplain programs we have, but also understanding that, and I'll be able to explain it more when I get into the presentation of how, when we look at all of this stuff collectively, how it all works together. Because we're not relying on just one thing itself to be a sole source for the resources that we're trying to provide for staff. And so, yeah, a part of what we were working on with that policy to make sure that we covered all of that. When we got a good draft worked up, I sent it to our DEI director, Linda, to have her look at it from a DEI lens to make sure that we were capturing everything that we needed to capture in there. So that was a part of building that. And so coming back to the org chart, and the last thing that I want to talk about as far as personnel is in these boxes right here up under the patrol division. Another change that we've made is we've added lieutenant positions to each of the patrol squads. And so previously we did not have that. Previously, the patrol squads were run by sergeants, and then there were 2 lieutenants in the patrol division, and they kind of just split up duties between all 4 teams. And just looking at what was going on and what we were seeing from that setup is we weren't being as efficient as we needed to be with the size of the agency, the size of the teams, the number of officers that we have, and then the tasks that we keep adding on to staff and to personnel. And so we really needed to have, an administrator, a supervisory administrator on all of these squads to really manage the work and the personnel. And everything that goes on, with the patrol division being that's where a lot of the moving parts are, is in the patrol division. And so we are at the tail end of finishing up a lieutenant process. And so then the next week or so, we'll be making some offers for the lieutenants. But that's the next wave of what we have coming from as we're building out the leadership team here. Is we have several openings in the lieutenant space, and we're finishing up that process as we speak. And so with the line of captains and getting them in place, and as we're working to build out what that team looks like, we have the lieutenants coming next. And so, that's looking up for us, because that's a void that we have right now that we're really looking to be impactful for us and to really help us out from just a leadership in the department.
I may ask a question. Yeah, the part of the reason why I'm asking questions is because we've talked about it, and I want to make sure that you all hear this and that the community hears it. So, Jason, when you talked about adding the lieutenants, part of that was, an extra benefit to the community to have, so that the 2 lieutenants that were there before were not being stretched thin in terms of managing their team. So can you talk about the benefit to the community by adding those 2 additional lieutenants?
Yes, and so a lot of it, what it boils down to is capacity. Like, what capacity do individuals have and what their roles and responsibilities are? And so if I'm a community member and if I have an issue, because with the sergeants are largely out on the street, like that is what their primary role and responsibilities are, is being out in the field and being out on patrol. And so the sergeants, if there's an issue going on with an officer, you know, and they need a supervisor out there, the corporals and the sergeants were the individuals that are going to respond to that, you know, typically. And so depending on what schedules they were working, at least half of the day, we did not have a lieutenant or somebody at that level that could answer the call from community members or any issues that arose, or, and more importantly, and the critical part is somebody who wasn't involved in something. Because if we have something significant happen, supervisor's normally going to go to that. The sergeant is normally going to go to that, or the corporal, because that's what their responsibility is. Hey, I got this going on. I have a use of force, or you know, somebody is irate and they want to file a complaint. And if the only supervisor that we have on duty at that time is the individual that responds out there, and then that community member wants to bring a concern, it's not a good look having to tell them, all right, well, I'm the only supervisor here and I'm out here. So they're looking at that person as, you know, well, you're going to take the officer's side because you're out here with them, instead of having somebody that is not out there, that is their role and responsibility to handle all of those issues 24/7. So it's giving us that 24/7 coverage, to where if a community member has an issue, they always have the highest ranking supervisor that's on duty, that's leading the shift, that they can call and talk to. And 99% of the time, that individual is not going to be directly connected with it or associated with whatever the issue is that they have going on. And so, you know, really just trying to cut down on the amount of times that we have to tell people, well, if you call us in the morning, you can get this person's, you know, supervisor, because oftentimes the people that they see out there, they don't want to have anything to do with them. If they're upset about something, they want to talk to somebody that's not out there, that they know is in charge. And so it's just adding that other layer of accountability. It's really what we were looking to accomplish with this. And then also, you know, another piece that I look at from it is, one of the things that we're working in building out is to where, when we have better capacity and coverage and oversight on teams, is those teams being creative and innovative in their own space where they're working on things and looking to do things. And so one thing we're going to be implementing when we get the lieutenants in place are like team projects. Like, you know, bring me an idea from your team that your entire team can work on and put together. And this was something, you know, that I've done previously at another agency, and having that team-led effort where you have somebody that has the capacity to do that, because the sergeants are too busy and they're being run through ragged to be able to do that. And so, you know, having that additional leadership of the individual teams gives us more capacity to be able to build out and do different things and new things, to where each one of them could try something differently, and then they can all get together and look and see, all right, man, this was the success that I had, or this was the failure that I had, and different things like that.
What might be an example of a project?
So I can tell you the one that my team did. So I was a watch commander of a patrol squad. And so I came to my team and I told them, hey, you know, I want us to do a community project. I'm not telling you all what to do, but I want you all to work collectively on a community project that everybody on the team can have a hand in and can be a part of. And so, man, y'all work together and y'all bring me your ideas. And so the team got together, and what they came up with, so one of my officers on that team was a local kid, went to the local high school there in the town that we were working in. And one of her classmates had recently been killed in a car accident. And so his parents wanted to create a scholarship in his name, in his honor, at the local high school. So she brought that idea to the table. So the team got to talking, and so they came up with a scholarship submission program, to where, you know, all the officers on my team, like, so they all went and looked and see what everybody's strengths and weaknesses were on that team. And then they came up with a scholarship submission program where individuals, so they laid out all the guidance of what the students had to submit and what needed to be in their packet. And then what I had to commit to was giving officers time to work with the students on their packets. And so if one of my officers were better at report writing, so all of my report writing officers were assigned to the essays. If there was a research component that needed to go into their packet, and so one of my officers that was more investigatively skilled in looking up things, that was their role. And so everybody kind of, you know, signed up for parts of the process that they would work with the students on to get their submissions, you know, turned in forward. And so something like that, which I would have never have thought about that, and that wasn't an idea that I could have had, but, you know, empowering them to work through something like that, and that's what and I didn't have to change anything with their submission. It was a great idea and something that was feasible for us to be able to do. It didn't cost the department any money or anything like that. And so, you know, having that example, you know, just things like that to where you're tapping into your staff. And so it's not just one person trying to come up with the idea, but having somebody that understands the power and the benefit of being able to do things like that and encouraging your people to come up with stuff like that is kind of what we would be looking at with just different projects. So, you know, the sky's the limit as to what, you know, to what that could look like. You know, really the only guidance would be, needs to be something that everybody can be a part of, where it's a real team effort. Yes.
Joe.
Go ahead.
So in a conversation that I had with one of the police officers, one of the things that they listed out as a challenge was all of the specialty overwhelming things that had to be dealt with when you're on patrol. When you get a call that it looks like someone is homeless, being kicked out of their home at 2 o'clock in the morning with a young child, what do? You can't just leave them. What services can you provide to them? And at the time, the police officer said, I just brought him back to the police station because there was no go-to, there was no support services that they knew of, at least at 2 o'clock in the morning, to be able to handle it. So do we have someone either in place in this grid or an idea of someone who may be able to put together that resource list?
Our crisis counselor so the combination of our crisis counselor who's new and our victim advocate, Danica, that's the tag team. And that's all of the stuff that they're working on, and specifically Kia. And since she's been here hitting the ground running, looking at, man, who are our partners, who are our resources, who is available at 2 o'clock in the morning when we have these issues and these problems, to where we can put all of that information together and have it for all of the patrol officers and all the patrol team adjustment. Yes. Yes, sir.
Chief, can you go back to the org chart? 1 second.
Wait.
Personnel, right?
There we go.
The detective task force officer, can you speak to that as far as what task force that officer?
So that is the fugitive task force. Yes, that's the fugitive task force. And so that task force is run locally. And so, you know, officers from other departments all put together on it's a federal task force. And so what they do is they look for the worst of the worst. And a great example of that would be when we had the shooting a couple months ago on Peace Station. Any violent crime that we have like that, and that's the benefit of having a task force officer assigned to that, is we call our person that's on the task force, hey, we need this individual found, and then they have a host of resources and stuff that they get to tracking people down. The shooting that we had last year around the corner from the PD, that was given to our task force officer, and I think it was either 2 or 3 individuals, but within like 2 weeks, and it started with, we didn't know who these people were. Like, it wasn't like our victim could tell us it was this person, this person, this person. They got the information and they started hunting and tracking, and within 2 weeks, we had all of those suspects in custody.
And I'm sorry, I just want to add to that because I just wanted the community to know how beneficial that is for us.
Yes.
Additional resources and they're specialized to tracking dangerous criminals. So I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I would love, like, as we grow and as the department grows, there are a lot of other opportunities, you know, with task forces that we can take advantage of, and they are a great resource if you're able to tap into that resource.
And actually, I do want to say thanks for nominating a person for that. The Marshall Task Force is a purely voluntary thing. I know of at least 5 jurisdictions that come right off the bat that don't have a task force officer. And it makes a huge difference when it comes to just not only big dangerous criminals, but just the interagency coordination. So thanks for putting in the effort on that. In this flow chart, I have a couple of questions that come to mind. I know that now that we've got divisions with captains, was there or is there a person who's essentially a first sergeant whose job it is to take care of like just the people issues? I know a lot of organizations and a lot of other entities I've seen when they have this sort of divisional structure, they'll have a first sergeant, basically a sergeant who's there to just deal with the personnel issues that happen on a day-to-day basis. You know, the person who's going to be, for lack of a better phrase, the person to go whine to when there's something that's going on, but their focus is on people. Is there any consideration as to creating that in the future?
My outlook for the entire organization is that everybody's focus is on people.
Right.
And so that's, you know, that's just a part of what comes from me. And so we're talking just like, so say one of these officers right here, and so that would be the supervisors on that team, if I'm understanding your question.
But I mean, kind of slightly different, not necessarily in the supervisory role. For example, in a military organization, you'll have, say, a platoon commander.
Okay.
That person will have a platoon sergeant, but at the company level, you'll have a first sergeant whose sole job is to say, listen, I'm keeping track on who's got their PT proficiency, or I'm the one making sure that all the spouses know that on this day, if something happens at home and they're out on patrol, you can call me and I can take care of those sort of things. It can be a wider range of things, but it creates a little bit of a buffer, but also an informal route for a lot of internal problem solving things. And we can talk about that a lot on this offline, but I was just checking to see if there was something like that within your
how I'm
organization.
understanding your question of there being just a one-off place that covers all of that, no.
Yeah.
It's how I'm processing your question or statement. It's more, there are different components that would capture and cover different parts depending on what the issue was or what was going on with the individual.
Okay, great. And the other part of the question I have is, I love the vision orientation, because I think it really does streamline a lot of things. What steps do you have in place to kind of prevent mission creep? I'd love to keep everyone focused on I know you like to keep everybody focused on the main task, which is ensuring that Apex is safe.
Mhm.
But as you know, a lot of additional things constantly get thrown at you guys in order to do stuff. So,
No.
so what mechanisms do you have in place to kind of either prevent that, alert us to that, or keep it on the forefront of us?
And so the big component is adding the additional leadership in the organization, because that was one of the voids that I recognized when I got here, and I would ask a question about something and it was, well, I don't know, or we hadn't thought about that, or this person isn't here and isn't available because they're off right now. And so seeing that we didn't have that coverage that we needed to have is, breaking this up and adding this division commander over here. Now adding that additional line of leadership at the lieutenant level over here is really designed to do exactly what you're talking about. So,
Great, thank you.
all right, so going to transition now and just hit some highlighted policy and procedure updates for things that we've been working on and some things that we've implemented. So notable changes. So General Order 1002 is traffic enforcement. And some of the notable changes that we've made in this area. And so the first bullet point here, officers required to have legal authority or active investigation to run tags. And so what we're talking about, or what we implemented in this, had to deal with. So when I first got here, one of the things that I saw and that I heard feedback on is officers just riding around on patrol, so not dispatched anything, not assigned anything, and let's just say the officer pulls up to a red light and there's a car in front of them. So the car hasn't committed any violation of any sort, but because it's in front of me, we can run the tag and just see, hey, who's driving the car, or who owns the car, and then I can run the driver or the owner of the car and see if there's anything going on with that person and whatnot. And so there was no rhyme or reason to it. Now, legally, can we do that? Absolutely, yes. There's no expectation of privacy to a license plate that is displayed on the back of your vehicle. So the courts have already established that. But what we find is in doing that practice, that leads to other issues and other problems, i.e., all right, so if I run your tag and I see that something's wrong with your vehicle, and so I pull you over and I stop you, what is the number one question that people ask when the officer gets up to their vehicle? Why did you stop? And so if my response to that is, well, I stopped you because your tag is expired. Or you know, your tag doesn't show that you have valid insurance. Okay, well, you know, but what was I doing? Was I speeding? Did I have my seatbelt on? Like, why did you run my tag? And that's where the conflict starts. Well, because I can, or well, the law allows me to, and then that often leaves people feeling as though that they're being targeted for something. And then you start adding in other variables. You know, the officer is a female and the driver is a male, so he may feel as though he's being targeted because he's a male driving the kind of vehicle that I'm driving. I've had people come to me and say, well, I was, you know, they did this because I was driving this vehicle, or because I looked young. They didn't think a young person could be driving this vehicle. And so what we tried to do and make sure that we have, you know, equity in our practices and how we're going about doing our daily job is, man, we put a component in here to where there needs to be some legal authority or an active investigation, something that at the end of the day that we can explain to people why we did what we did. And it's a much different conversation if you're riding around and there is a violation on your car or your vehicle, and that is the catalyst that gets me to run your tag and then everything that goes along with it after that, to where, all right, that conversation is totally different now. You know, all right, I pulled you over because you have this violation. In addition to this violation, your tag is expired or you don't have insurance or what have you, to where it cuts down, you know, individuals' potential bias or even the perception that somebody may have that, all right, the officer's only doing this to me for this reason, or you pull up and why did you run my tag as opposed to running the car that's next to me? Oh, well, I look like this, that person looks like that. That's why you homed in on me. No, these are the violations that were present, or, you know, we're working this investigation, something that has some teeth to it, to where when we have to have those conversations on the back end with people, we're able to explain things a lot better and really trying to look at it from an equity lens. Another thing that we put in here, that we put in the policy, is a requirement for officers to notify the supervisor if they're on a traffic stop and they plan on issuing more than 3 citations to somebody. Now, this is not something that happens a whole lot, but in some cases when we see it happen, it's normally, or it's associated with the individual has upset the officer. And it could be looked at as retaliation for, you know, for upsetting the officer or making them mad or some kind of conflict, to where, all right, now the officer has the power and authority. All right, I'm going to show you and I'm going to write you for every violation that I can find on your car. And so instead of that happening and all of those tickets get issued and then the person calls and complains, and then we find out about it, and now we have to try to backtrack and work through that, is, man, we put this mechanism in because if you need to write somebody more than 3 citations on one traffic stop, then you should very easily be able to explain why the reason behind that is. And so having this component in there where they have to do it before they issue the citations really is a safety mechanism to protect the officers from making bad decisions and ultimately leading us down a bad road. And so to where they got to talk that through with the supervisor, and the supervisor's job is to ask the questions and really get to the why behind why do we need to do this. And typically what you see in that is, what are the violations? Like a tag is the easiest thing. You could have 4 or 5 different violations just related to a tag alone. And if you see several of those, then you start kind of, light bulb starts to come on, like, all right, this person probably upset the officer, and now, you know, they may be something to take it out. So just a mechanism to prevent that stuff from happening on the front end.
Before we move on, I see you're going through this here. I want to ask you a question about the
Yes, sir.
tag thing. I totally get the equity piece. We don't want, you know, to put officers in a position where they're, you know, being accused of having some bias or even, you know, an opportunity for some unconscious bias or whatever to manifest.
Yes,
Does
sir.
that make sense? It seems to me though that these sort of random spot checks and tags it seems like that can catch bad guys, right? Like you can catch
Absolutely.
stolen cars, you can catch people with warrants, you can catch some serious issues. So I guess my question is, have we found that that's not the case in practice? And if not, like, couldn't there be some sort of halfway position here where you can run tags, but only use it for a stop if there's something serious above a certain threshold, like a stolen vehicle?
So yes, all of the above could happen. And what, you know, we've looked at and what I would like to do is they have tag readers that we could buy and put on the vehicles. And that takes the bias component out of things because the tags readers run all of the tags of everybody. And that's really how you get to getting the stolen vehicles and all of the things that are out there. And so that's, that's what I was looking at, or that's what we're looking at as to be the kind of stopgap to cover that. Because yes, there have been instances where, we've gotten some things, from those traffic stops. And so really, how I look at it is you kind of weigh the pros and the cons of it. And what I see as the biggest con of it is I don't want officers going out there every day with the mindset that they are preying upon the people that just drive through this community. Now, if we're looking at the behaviors and the actions and the violations of people, those are individuals that we should be coming in contact with. But just having the lens of, all right, let me just run, every tag just arbitrarily, just fishing for something. All right, if you're fishing, naturally, you're going to catch something eventually. And so we can tap that success of what we've caught. But we also have to look at the impact of all of the ones that did not pan out to that. And what was the impact of those individuals that got stopped and had that interaction, and had that conversation, and how they left, feeling as a result of that. And so looking at it to allow technology to help us out in that space to where we're still able to capture that same thing is really, really where I see.
If I can just respond, I think that's a great idea. I love the idea of the automatic tag readers.
Yes, sir.
I went on a ride along last year or the year before or something. And what struck me was just the time that the officer spent putting in, how it's kind of a distracted exercise. Like you're over the laptop clicking on something and the dude's driving, or sitting at a red light. I'm like, well, I like finding stolen cars, but I don't want it to be a cause of an incident.
Absolutely.
So I love the idea of automatic tag readers. I think that sounds fantastic.
Yes, sir.
But this doesn't, if you have just a normal traffic stop, first, let me stop by saying you're taking a lot of arguments away from a lot of defense counsel with this policy, by the way. I just want to put that right up front. Because it doesn't take away, if you have the traffic stop where you really find an illegal behavior, it's the person. You get their license, you're like, oh, there's warrants. Then you guys still have the ability to take whatever the next step is. I don't know if this is really restricting you in terms of what takes place. I think it's more of a safety procedure in terms of saying, these are the steps that we're going to have before just the idea of running tags, because quite frankly, most guys aren't running tags all the time. It's too time intensive, labor intensive. You pull the license. When you get the license, if there's something there, then you'll check on the license, not on the tags.
Yes, sir.
That's just my experience working these issues.
Yes.
Are the tag readers expensive? You said.
Everything is.
Yeah, bad question. So yes.
Yes, everything is. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is, we participate in the governor's highway safety initiatives and grant campaigns. So we're able to build up points that we can use towards equipment and things. So a lot of the message boards that you see that we utilize were purchased through that program and stuff. And so there's some other, funding that we'll be looking to see cover some of the costs and stuff. General Order 707, field interviews and investigations. So with this one, we changed how we document individuals that are detained but found not to be involved in the incident under investigation. So this one is key because in our system, we have the capability to link individuals to things. And one problem that we found was, so let's say we had the home invasion fiasco that we had last year. So we had 3 individuals run out, and so we're chasing them all over the place, and we're looking for them. And so in the course of that, we find an individual in the area that matches the description of one of the suspects. And so we stop that individual and we detain them to ascertain if they were involved in it or not. And so that individual turns out was not involved, had nothing to do with it. And so before we made this change, how that was being documented is we would get that person's name and information and we would put them in that report. And with the categories that we had, they would go in as an involved other. Okay. And so normally the officer that stops and has that interaction is not the officer that's at the scene doing the primary report. Okay, and so everybody that has an involvement in that has a supplemental report. So their own separate supplemental report to highlight what they did in this case. And so that individual that we stopped and detained, their involvement is captured, could be 4, 5, 6 supplemental attachments down in the report. But if we were to have another interaction with this individual, and if we were to put their name in our system and pull them up and pull up their history is going to show that they were an involved other of a home invasion or armed robbery, or whatever the case may be. And if somebody didn't take the time to read through that entire report and read through all of the supplementals, they would never get to the place where they saw that this individual had absolutely nothing to do with that case whatsoever. And so, we saw that as a kind of a false flag where, a lot of people are not going to dig that far. You're looking at something and you look and see like, oh man, you were involved other in armed robbery. So you must be a bad guy, or you must be involved in this, or different things like that, to where we took that out and they have to separate it, and they do an own individual separate, documentation or field interview report, which is in a separate module where we're not labeling that person as an involved other to a robbery. In that separate report, we document what our interaction was and what was going on, and we can reference the case number for the robbery, but separating it out so we don't have people going in our system. And when you just look at it on the surface, it makes it look like they were involved in criminal activity or associated with it when they had absolutely nothing to do. And another thing, so it has to do with our selection process. So, one of the things that, people would talk to me about when I would meet with them when I got here is how they felt about how selections were done to go to specialized units, or how, promotions were done, and just people not feeling as though, that process was as fair as it could be, and different things like that. And so with the last round of selection processes that we ran, we implemented some changes to it, and we did a variety of different things so we could collect feedback from the individuals that participated in it, so we could hear from them of what did they see value in, and what did they like, what did they didn't like, as we continue to, really try to tweak this to come up with the end product that everybody feels comfortable with, and everybody feels is fair at the end of the day. And so, one of the main things is now having a DEI director, Linda. And so she wasn't, her schedule didn't allow for her to participate in every single process, but the large majority of processes that we've run thus far, we had her on our selection board where she could weigh in and make sure and give us some feedback if she saw something, from a DEI lens that we were missing or we weren't incorporating. This one right here, adding internal staff to the selection boards. So what that looked like is, detective position, so we have a posting, we have an opening in detectives. And like I said, some of the feedback that I've gotten is people, if we use outside people that are not in the organization, people complain that they don't know anything about us, and so you shouldn't use outside people. If we use internal people for the process, people complain, well, they got their friends, they're part of this clique, so they want to pick this person over here. So what we did is we had a mesh of individuals. And when it came to the internal staff, so once everybody submitted who's putting in for that position, we send an email out to them and we tell everybody, hey, send us, a list of names of people that you will feel comfortable being on the selection committee for this process. And so once we got that information back from the candidates, then, so one person, submit this name, another person submit this name. Once we collected that, then we sent those names to all of the candidates and said, hey, these are the individuals that were recommended to be a part of this process. Let us know if you have a problem with any of them participating in it, just so they have a voice in this process of how we're doing it. And so the individuals that we used were recommended to us by the individuals that were going through the process, and everybody in the process had a chance to, to strike them, if you will, from the process, to where, kind of put some of the onus on them, like you all had a hand in selecting the individuals that were going to be assessing you all throughout this process. And so we did get some positive feedback from adding that to the process. And then, the other piece is adding community members as assessors. And so, I mentioned going through the captain process and the lieutenant process that we just went through. Now that we outsourced those to a third-party vendor that ran those processes for us because they were, high-level leadership. But, those individuals, they often would ask us, do we have community members that we want to bring in to help with the scenarios and help assess? And so for both of those processes, we have multiple community members, that came on board to help assess, and were role players for the exercises. So they were able to give us feedback on the individuals and how they felt about the quality of the applicants, of the candidates that were going through those processes also. The Chief Circle is another thing that we've implemented here. And so what the Chief Circle is, so when I came on board, I wanted to create a Chief Advisory Committee of internal staff. And, there were just hearing a lot of complaints and people not happy with this and not happy with that. And we all know the challenge that communication is inside an organization of this size. And then also looking at some of the other initiatives, in the town that we knew were going to be coming down, some of the DEI initiatives and some of the committees and stuff and work with LGBTQ communities and liaisons and things. And so I just, incorporated all of that. And so our internal stuff and the outward facing initiatives that we were going to be a part of into the Chief Circle. And so what the circle stands for is communication, innovation, responsibility, commitment, leadership, and empowerment. And so this is a committee of internal staff from all parts of the organization. And so I have civilian staff, I have, about even with civilian staff members and sworn staff members on there, from telecommunicators to records clerks to people in the investigations. I think our victim advocate, she's on it. So just a wide spectrum of individuals from all parts of the organization. And now one thing that I had to communicate to them, that this is just not a complaint session. And so let's go back to our core principles. Like everything that we talk about in this space has to fall into one of these categories right here of the work that we are doing in here in betterment of the organization. And so some of the things that, that I take to the Chief Circle, are things that we know have the biggest impact on staff, or it may be something that's not going to be popular, with staff. And so instead of just the executive team working on all of this stuff and trying to factor in, all right, what's best for everybody in the department, this gives me another outlet that I could run ideas off of and I can get feedback from. And so, in looking at the communication piece, so I have the executive leadership team with all of my communication and all of our meetings, but now having this additional component of people that spread out all over the place and them understanding what their role and responsibilities are of being on this committee, to where if you're walking past the water cooler and you hear a couple of staff members talking about something that is inaccurate, you have firsthand knowledge and information because you are a part of this circle, I expect you to jump into that conversation and provide factual information or add context to what they're talking about and different things like that. And they know to bring information back to the group of, all right, man, what are people talking about? What are the issues that we're seeing? What are people unhappy about? What are people complaining about? So we can make sure that, things stay on our radar and that I'm taking in information from all parts of the organization and not just things coming straight up always through the chain of command. And so, we finally got this off the ground. We just had our second meeting last week or so. And so we just have, a variety of initiatives that this group will be working on for things inside the organization and some of the initiatives that will be townwide.
So is there a process that officers or civilian staff go through to report to the circle, or how does that work in terms of, I'm assuming you're gathering information in a variety of ways, but it sounds like it's mostly aimed at concerns that you're trying to address. Is that right?
So that's one of the main, components of it, are concerns and issues or just pressing matters regardless of what they are. And so, like everything in the technology space, so we have a Teams group set up, of the circle. And so when in between meetings, that's the primary focus of how we're communicating with things and whatever issues or what we're working on is often communicated through our Teams group. And also they have the ability to call a meeting. And so they don't always have to wait for me to schedule one, but if there's something going on, they know that they have the ability to call a meeting and schedule a meeting if it's something that we need to get together and talk about in person versus waiting until our next scheduled meeting. So some of the pending changes and things that we're working on, so General Order 405, field reporting and management, updating how searches are documented and adding greater detail. One of the things that I found when I got here is, you know, we could have somebody stop for a traffic violation and then that leads to a search of their vehicle. And when I go and I try to find details about why we searched this vehicle, who we searched, who was in the vehicle and all of that stuff, that information wasn't captured anywhere. And so, you know, we went to the policy, so we're still working on updating this to make sure that we have everything captured in of how we want to see that information and what all we want detailed in there. So if there's anything that we need to go back and look at and analyze, we have all of the information captured on the front end from the report. Also adding requirements for reports to be filled out for individuals detained in handcuffs but released without charge. That was another issue that we noted, to where take the individual from the robbery deal. And so now in that one, I don't believe that individual was put in handcuffs, but let's just say he was, you know, in talking through some different scenarios and different things that we've seen happen, where we can have somebody that, you know, we think is a suspect or something. And so we detain them, put them in handcuffs. It turns out that it's not them. And so we let them go. But we didn't document that in a reporting form. And me personally, somebody gets put in handcuffs, I think that automatically triggers, we need to do a report on this and we need to have it documented. Just in the event, you know, something happened or something comes back, we need to have all of that covered. So just putting some things in play to make sure that we're capturing the information that we want to capture. And so we can track everything and analyze it if it gets to that point of what we need to analyze. Another big one that we're working on is the disciplinary system. And so we're working and adding a discipline matrix into our discipline policy. And what that matrix is and how it works is we don't want staff having to be worried tooth and nail if they make a mistake and not knowing what's going to happen to them. Like that part of what we've seen is worse than what actually happens. And in my career, like I've seen people quit and leave and go take other jobs just because the anticipation, like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me as a result of, as the end of this, whatever I'm dealing with. And it was something that they were going to be perfectly fine and it wasn't that big of a deal. But just the communication breakdown, you know, led that person, you know, to think like that. And so, you know, with the discipline matrix and trying to ensure that we have consistency and how we apply discipline and how we use discipline is equitable throughout the organization, where when you build that matrix out, and so everybody is working off of that matrix. And so part of the policy and the updating is it does give you an option to go outside of the matrix, but they are, you know, specific guidance, and you have to provide a written detailed explanation as to why your recommendation is outside of the matrix. And so nobody has the ability to recommend something outside of the matrix without a detailed explanation for us to attach it to. And so just really adding consistency, where if somebody in you know, one squad that never sees another person on another squad, but they do the exact same thing, then and their history is exactly the same or identical, then how those individuals are treated should be the same. And that's really what you're looking to capture in having that matrix, is that consistency for how individuals are treated, you know, with action behaviors or what have you. And then also separating out non-discipline versus discipline. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we have in our profession, because, you know, some verbiage will get back to me and, you know, it'll be like, you know, well, man, this officer got written up for this and this is nonsense. And I'm like, okay, well, I had to sign off on that. And when I hear written up, that's discipline to me. And so we have a lot of individuals that they could be counseled on something, or a coaching session is where they just sat down and talked to. But just the simple fact that it was written down that, hey, I sat down and had a conversation with this individual, their response to that is as if they have been disciplined. And so in updating the policy, we're going to have a section specifically titled non-discipline, and it's going to cover everything in there that we do. So, you know, if we assign somebody remedial training or, you know, policy review or coaching, counseling, all of those things that fall into the non-discipline bucket, that's going to be just, you know, explicitly spelled out in policy to try to help, you know, just the perception that staff feels about, you know, being talked to about things and feeling as though that they've been disciplined for everything when they haven't been. And then also the Community Advisory Committee. And Compliance Manager Megan is here. And so Megan is working on that committee, the structure and the guidance for us to review. And so she's working on that, and we should be getting some stuff together soon for us to look at and review as far as, what that committee is going to look like in the structure that we recommend.
So what falls under compliance?
So professional standards, so just look at it as individuals' behavior. So if somebody gets a complaint, so like all complaints will be handled through the compliance, the professional standards of the compliance manager office. So complaints, internal investigation. So let's say, we have a staff member here that, there's some misconduct allegations or information that comes forward. And so we have to do an internal investigation, on that individual. All of that falls up under the compliance manager. And so when we get to looking at individual actions and behaviors, let's say the compliance manager comes up to do an audit. And so that audit, could entail looking at body camera footage or in-car camera footage, looking for a specific issue, like whatever the audit has to deal with. When you look at our use of force incidents, is doing auditing on use of force and analyzing that information, looking to see, do we have any discrepancies in how force is used and applied and different things like that. All of that falls up under the compliance space. Yes, ma'am. And then the big one that we have pending is our benchmark analytics system. And so we are going through the implementation phase of this system. And so currently, how we have things set up. So training information is housed in one system. Use of force is housed in a different system. Internal affairs information is housed in a completely separate system. And we just have things all over the place. And it doesn't allow us sometimes to really get a clear picture of the individual. And so with this system, all of these things outlined on here is modules that we'll be using where everything is tracked inside one system. And this is not everything that it does. And so our pursuits will be housed in this system. And a lot of the paper documents that we use, we're transitioning into this platform where we can better track just all of our documentation, our forms, where everything is done, by hand. And so as a result of this, we're going through and the system is completely customizable. So we can look at it and see what metrics we want to track and what we want the system to do and what information that we want to be able to go and analyze on the back end. And we can set up all of these modules individually to do exactly what we want them to do and to track the information that we want to track. And so we have, several modules in the sandbox. Sandbox is the system that they set up where we can go in and play around with the forms and we can have others utilize it. We get feedback. Our field training of officers, we're building that in here as well. We have an officer that's going through training. And so we're doing some piloting with, how the system works for them. So this is really going to be a game changer for us. Just more important, like with time, the time that we spend on paper and heck, sometimes it's even trying to track down the paper in this building where, we'll be able to look in the system and see, where it's been sent, who has it, and different things like that. And then from accountability standpoint, it will allow us to track things. So let's take use of force, for instance. Supervisor inserts the use of force report. And when we get that report, we look at it and review it, and there's problems with it, or it doesn't capture everything that we need to capture, we can send it back. That's something that we can go and we can look at from the supervisors. And all right, are they understanding the policies that we have in place in their review of these things? Or do we need to send them to training and different things like that? We will have all of that information captured in the system. And so, and one component also is the employee warning system. And so that was a part of that Senate bill that came out last year where all agencies have to have the employee warning system. And this has the most robust employee warning system on the market today. And so we'll definitely get a lot of benefit out of this.
Will this also allow Apex to compare itself to other municipalities who are using the same system?
We potentially could, but it wouldn't be an apples to apples comparison because this system is so customizable. that, you know, what they want to look at and track may be differently than what we want to look at and track. And so, you know, we could set up, you know, this activity model, we could set it up completely different from another agency that had it. And so it would depend on what we were looking to compare. Now, you know, we would be, if there was something specific that we wanted to compare, we would be able to pull that information out of the system, but we would have to kind of manually do that. And it wouldn't just be something that would be automatically done, because we would have to look at what we were trying to compare, because you can set it up however you want to set it up. Emerging topics update. So school traffic safety. Crossing guards. Crossing guards has been a hot button topic here lately. And so we have our open crossing guard positions back up on the town website. And so I know we went looking for them. Some of y'all went looking for them and they weren't there. So what happens, you know, in HR is if we have positions that are posted for a really long time, then they pull them down at times and let some time go by, and then they put them back up instead of just having a posting on there where it shows this has been open for 8 months or 9 months. And so they refresh them every so often. And so that's what had happened when we were looking for the last time, is HR had just pulled them down. But we have a couple openings. And so we have, and I was just looking at this the other day, I believe we still have 2 current positions that are vacant that have been open, you know, for a while. And there's also been some discussion about trying to add more, i.e. the Friendship Campus. You know, we don't have one that's budgeted for that area, but that's something that we're going to be looking to add. So we have some additional coverage down there.
Chief, just a question real quick.
Yes, sir.
I know there's a neighboring agency that has contracted that out to an organizational company. Do you know
Yes,
what
sir.
the success of that program is and how it's working out for them?
So I don't know the success of the program of how it's working out for them. We have explored that here. And so we got a couple quotes. There were 2 vendors that we found that provide that service. And the cost of going that route is double of what, you know, the money that we have allocated right now for it. And so, but we have that information. It's just much more significant cost.
Is it possible to hire someone who's like 20% of their job is to be a crossing guard and the other 80% is other administrative things like in the department? So you don't have to have someone whose job title is this necessarily?
Anything is possible. So yes, we would just have to come up with what that's going to look like and where we can utilize that person. It doesn't even have to be somebody that's working inside the police department. If there's another town department that between crossing guard hours, if they could use that individual, man, I would love to be able to do that to get us the coverage that we need. So absolutely, that's possible.
But that's not been necessarily the direction we've been going so far, at least.
No, sir.
Okay.
I wonder if it's possible to send out an email to part-time basis to see if they're interested.
Well, I think there's a tremendous amount of energy in the community to even volunteer for these positions. I think we have to find a way, an easy path for the people around the schools who have children going to the schools, want to see this happen, who have the time. Maybe they don't have a full-time job. Maybe they'd like to do this to, you know, sort of ease them into that. And that's really what I'm most concerned about, is making sure these positions are numerous enough and flexible enough to accommodate people who the pay doesn't really matter, you know. And I'd also like to point out that getting these positions filled and getting more of them, getting them filled, it's going to free up our SROs.
Very much so.
Because what's happening now is our SROs.
And that's further down, me talking about, you know, the challenges. So, but absolutely.
I just want to respond to you, Councilman. When I was here, we always had holes in these positions. And I think the current events, people are excited, they're motivated to get involved, they're passionate because it's fresh, they're emotional. But when it comes down to it, just how the schedule is for crossing guard is tough to find something. And I know you mentioned like, hey, how about, you know, a parent who's walking their kid to middle school or high school? Not many do that anymore. But I think that's an issue, and that's what we're gonna have a problem, which is why I say can we explore, you know, a vendor to see if they can provide that. But anything is possible, as Chief said. We can look into it for sure.
My hope is we could actually split the shifts. I think the split shift is a tough part, right? Like, you know, work in the morning and work in the night, that stuff.
Yes, yeah, and we don't have any data to back that up, but just what we believe in looking at it and the challenge in filling these slots, I think largely has to deal with that gap of time in between and the shorter time period as it is, where it's worth the person's time to invest in that. And so, being able to add and increase the pool of individuals where, somebody's not responsible for both sessions and they could just do one, that's something that we're going to look at and explore. So with having it back open, just really look and see like, who is interested in doing it and who submits to want to do it. Because as far as the volunteer piece, like we wouldn't just sign up on that because there are certain things that we have to do in a certain vetting. Like it's a school function. And so you gotta go through the checks, sex offender registry and all of those other things. So we can't just say, all right, anybody, can go up there and do it. There's a short little training thing that people, so it's not a tall lift. It's just a checks and balances component that is required because it's associated with the school.
Another option too, I wonder if we can have a sign created and put at the areas where we're having the most issues and are the most energy, just to say, if you're interested, please contact us at whatever.
Yeah.
Do the school buses come at a different time than the walking at all, or is it totally overlapped? Where they could do their school bus route and then the people
I think
walking.
there's multiple school bus routes because they have a shortage
They're
of
just
school bus
totally-
drivers.
Well, the
That-
bell
that-
rings, all kids gotta be there at a certain time depending on the school. So people are walking and the buses are dropping off at the same time.
At the same time, okay.
Yeah,
To meet that
yeah.
bell.
Chief, and I say this for the benefit of those who are watching. Can you, I hope you're going to do this. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown as to like what the role of an SRO is and how an SRO isn't necessarily the crossing guard? Because I know that
Yeah,
that's
so
been,
the SRO is absolutely nothing.
right. And I think,
And the SRO, their role, duties and responsibilities are on the school grounds and inside the school. The crossing guard positions are the roadway essentially, is what that responsibility is. And so it's completely separate. One of our crossing guards that positions that we've had staff for I don't know how long, the school is not even in our town limits. The school is in Cary, but the roadway is ours. And we got tasked with providing crossing guard for that because the crossing guard is specific to the road and the sidewalk is a part of the road. A lot of people don't know that, but sidewalk is still considered a part of the roadway. And so it's purely roadway based where the SRO is purely on the property, the campus of the school.
thank you. And I think that helps a little bit of, I know there's been a lot of questions about that.
And so with our crossing guard shortages, a lot of people have seen SROs at the locations, trying to help out, with crossing guard duties, because we have the shortage. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to do what we can to keep everybody safe. But they're being stretched in a lot of different directions. Education campaigns. And so, the traffic safety unit does a lot of education stuff and they win a lot of awards for their education components. But we are trying to still increase and beef up, what we're doing and the awareness around the schools, not just for the students, but for the parents also. And so I know they're in talks with the school board to look and see, if there's some additional things that they will approve, video messaging and things that they will send out to the parents and all of that stuff. Watch For Me NC is a program here in North Carolina, about pedestrian safety. And just different things like that, and just trying to educate the students and the parents, the importance of using the crosswalks and some that have the lighted systems and the crosswalk buttons and all of that technology. Just really, trying to educate people as best as we can for that. Safety measures, once again, traffic safety unit, constantly works with, town traffic engineers and North Carolina DOT on recommendations for increased safety measures, not just in school zones, but all around town. Whenever people, submit complaints to us or raise up concerns or issues related to traffic safety. And so, but naturally, with the schools and with the volume of kids that are walking, this is something that they really focus on.
Jason, these last two bullets, those are also working with Vision Zero.
Yes, absolutely. And then the additional staffing. And so the volume of traffic complaints and problem areas are really just beyond what our staffing is right now, especially from the traffic safety. And we're going to have to add more staff to that. You know, with the incident over by the Friendship Campus and all the resources that we were pouring in there as a result of that, just leaves a lot of other areas for it where something happens over there, and you know it's the same fallout, the same outcry of individuals, and it's just the volume of the growth, not just in Apex but around Apex, and the volume of cars that are going, and it's only going to continue to increase. And so that's just something that we're going to have to do is add more staffing in these areas to really be able to effectively and efficiently address some of these concerns.
I have a quick question about staffing.
Yes, ma'am.
So your vision of how your staff is from top to bottom, how many more additional staff members do you think you would need to get to what your vision is currently?
Currently, we need 8 additional patrol officers, and we probably need another 6 to 8. So probably about an additional 16 to 20 officers to be where we need to be. Now, I could better answer that question. I think it's next week. So we participate in the UNC School of Government benchmarking program, and we have that coming up. I'll be going to that. If it's not next week, then it's the week after next. But what I can share is when I looked at our benchmarking from last year's program and report, we had the lowest ratio of the towns that participated in the benchmarking of officers to population. And I don't anticipate that's going to change with this upcoming, because we didn't add the number of officers that we were looking to add this past year. And so, yeah, so we need about 16 to 20 and there are a lot of things that go into it when you talk about the number of staffing. And when you look at the issues that we deal with and that we face here, and when I give that number, I'm looking at quality of service. And that is what my focus is as a police chief, is the quality of service. I don't want to have to tell people that, okay, well, I'm sorry this happened to you because we don't have enough people for this and that, and I have to put all of my energy and effort behind that. Like, that's not what this town represents. And we're not at that place. I've been to places where that's what it was, and that's just what I had to settle for. And I don't want to see us get into a position where we get so far behind on what that benchmarking is that now we have serious problems and issues daily. And now we're trying to play catch up, because once you get behind, it's very hard to catch back up to it. And so when I give that number, it's really looking at a customer service base and lens of the town is spreading out because we annex a lot. We have to redo our coverage zones and break that up to where if an officer is in their zone, it should not take them 15 minutes to drive to a call for service. That's unacceptable in my book. And I think everybody in here, if you were on the receiving end of that service, regardless of what you were calling us for, you would think that that was unacceptable also. But currently, how we have grown and stretched out in some areas, that's what we have. And if it's not an emergency thing where the officer can drive lights and sirens to it, and they just have to drive regular with traffic, it can be 15, 20 minutes before we get there. And the officer was in their beat like they were supposed to be. And so we have to address issues like that on top of some of these capacity issues that we have in specialty units and some of the stuff that we're tasked with also.
When I've read that report, and I read it every time, I think it's really a great report. And you talk about the ratio of per capita number of officers. You know, I've always been like, well, it kind of makes sense that the places that have the lowest crime rate would have the lowest ratios. If you're thinking about, you would want the most officers with the higher, historically, the highest crime rates are occurring. Is that not a way you should look at it?
So it depends. It depends on what's going on in your community, and if you're looking at public safety holistically from a 360 lens. And so crime is not the sole driver of what is going on in your community. And when you look at quality of life and perception of safety is probably the number one component to what you're dealing with. Because regardless of what your crime numbers are, if you have a community of people that don't feel safe, you have a problem on your hands. And so, yeah, it's not just the crime component. And that's why I'm not a big fan of a lot of those formulas, because they can be manipulated a lot of ways, and there I haven't seen anything come out where they say, okay, this size town with this crime rate, this formula will absolutely work for you all. Like, you're not going to see that come from anybody, because it really breaks down to, what do you want your customer service lens to look like, and what are you willing to accept from that, and financially, you know, what do you have that you can throw at it to make sure that, you know, you have a community from a public safety lens that you know that you have everything covered that you need to have covered, and your response times are what they need to be, and you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, with how you're doing things. And so, while take Holly Springs as an example, and so Holly Springs, one of the last reports came out was, voted the safest city in North Carolina, and when you look at their ratio of officers to the size of their population, they have a significantly higher ratio than we do. And so it's not an accident that they're higher on that list than we are currently when it comes to public safety, because they have more that they can throw at it. Not just crime, but crime causing conditions, and also things that drive the perception of safety in communities.
And also, it doesn't calls for service and how they structure that as far as self-initiated versus those from residents. Did that kind of factor into that benchmarking study? Because I think
the benchmarking one?
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at it and see something.
Calls for service, I didn't.
Difference between self-initiated and dispatched.
Yeah, we break that information up,
Right.
with our stuff. But yeah, but the benchmarking piece, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they do that or not.
Yeah, maybe time to respond might be in that thing, but not we're talking about.
Well, and I think too, if we're talking about the ability to be able to build community and build relationships with the police department and the community itself, you do need more police officers to create that environment instead of rushing from one call to the next, to the next, to the next, because of area that you have to cover. It makes more sense to have more police officers to create that environment.
That's one. We want to talk about, gun violence and gun activity here in Apex. And so this chart right here is talking about gun theft that we experience in town. And so it's really a 3-year comparison, and then we have what our numbers look like to date here in 2022. But we see the increase going on. Now, it's not a large number that we're talking about. I believe this one right here is 5. We had a total of 5 guns stolen in Apex in 2019, and then 8, and then in 21 we jumped up to about 13, and so far in 22, so we're in November, we're already at 12 for the year. And so when we talk about gun violence and gun safety, one of the primary components of that is proper care and oversight of the guns that you have and that you own. Unlocked vehicles is heartbreaking to us. The amount of guns that are stolen from unlocked vehicles. And so, we're going to be doing some more campaigns, some more educational stuff and videos, just really trying to reinforce that. But we're seeing an increase in the number of guns that are stolen here in town. And so in looking at the number of gun violations, we see a slow increase in that also. Now, we're not talking about large numbers or large disparities here. 30 in 2019, 34 in 2020, 36 in 21. And so the difference in the colors, and I'm sorry, I didn't cover that in this one. So the orange, these are the number of reported cases. And so when you see the blue numbers higher, the blue number is actual guns. And so what this represents is some of these incidents, the people had multiple guns stolen from them in one case. And so that's the difference in the 2 lines on this chart. And so when we jump over to this one, the orange is the number of people that were arrested with a gun violation. And this is the number of charges Okay, and so the best way to describe that or what will contribute to that is if you have an individual that is a convicted felon and they shoot somebody. So they're automatically going to get 2 charges, one for the attempted murder, which is a gun violation, and then possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. And so that's why we wanted to capture these 2 separately, where these are individual people, these are the number of charges, because some individuals committed multiple violations, gun violations, with these incidents. And then the last chart here is showing, this is just overall gun activity covering everything in Apex. And so 43 incidents in 2019, 57 in 2020, 52, and we're up to 40 so far. And so this ranges everything to where somebody used the gun to, shoot somebody. The couple incidents that we've had of that over the last couple of years. If an officer makes a traffic stop and there's an illegal gun inside the vehicle that they recover, this is captured. If we have, say we have a domestic violence call and one of the individuals involved has a gun present there. Now, they didn't use it to shoot at the person or shoot them, but the gun is involved in a threat or anything like that, we would capture that information in this. So this is just the overall volume of incidents that we've had here in town where a firearm was present or involved in any capacity. And it also could be guns that we recovered or that we found that were stolen. Now, I think that was captured in one of these slides, or maybe I don't have another. There was one, I don't have, I thought I had on here where it gave the number, like of all of the guns that we've had stolen. Yeah, it was associated with this. I think we've recovered like 13 or 15 of these guns that have been stolen over the years. And so, I talked about the education efforts. So, we started increasing like the handouts that we have at community events when we have a table in the booth set up, to incorporate some gun violence information in that. We're working on some video messaging through social media platforms. We're going to get back to doing like the 9 p.m. routine announcements on social media so people can go check and hopefully, have their things locked up. And then another initiative that we're working on is the Youth Summit. We're looking at putting this on in January in conjunction with the MLK celebration that we have here in town and hosting a Youth Summit where we can, really connect with the youth specifically and talk about gun violence and just the choices that they're making with a lot of this stuff. So another initiative that, they sent information out is about the Gun Violence Prevention Advisory Committee. And so the state, North Carolina Department of Public Safety sent this information out to me a couple months ago that, because of the rising gun violence that we're seeing in communities around the country, they were starting up this statewide advisory committee. And so I submitted all of my information to be a part of that committee. I know Councilwoman Stallings, she was interested in that and looking at being a part of it also. And so we submitted everything. So we're just waiting to hear back on what next steps for this committee and what that's going to be. And the last topic I'm going to cover this evening is staff well-being. And so what are we doing to address staff well-being? And so this really speaks to when I spoke earlier about the positions that I highlighted when I was talking about. And so start with NC LEAP. So law enforcement, the North Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program. And so this is an organization that is just designed to help officers that have been involved in critical incidents. And so they do critical incident debriefings with individuals that have been involved in these things. And so currently we have one officer on staff that is a certified peer reviewer, peer support and debriefer through NC LEAP. And so with that one individual, we're looking to expand our network of individuals that are trained and certified in peer support as we build up our peer support program here inside the department. Then the next component is our crisis counsel. So that was Kia that I talked about earlier. And so her role is dual, to where she is heavily focused on people out in the community and the resources that we provide people in the community. But what we've seen in doing the research for all of this is a lot of resources are similar that staff could benefit from. And so part of her what she's been tasked with in the course of doing her work is identifying additional resources that are beneficial for us here as staff, and then also using, her expertise and her lens to help benefit staff. And I'm going to highlight what that looks like here in a second. The third component is getting our chaplain program revamped and started back up. And chaplains, throughout my entire career have been a great resource, for benefit to the department. And we've already seen the benefit of having these additional resources. We had an incident not long ago that was very traumatic for a family. And we were able to have the crisis counselor on board. We were able to have the chaplain on site on board. And the chaplain was updating me today that this was weeks ago, and he's still connected with that family and is helping them through things and stuff. And so just that holistic approach of the resources that we provide, for people. And so when we look at these three main components right here, so peer support through NC Leap, then crisis counselor services and resources, and then our chaplain program. And so we're started with one chaplain, and we're going to be building that out to a team. Much like with NC Leap, we're going to be building that out with a team of peer support staff. And as the crisis counselor, as we build that program out, if we're looking to have 24/7 coverage for the community, one person cannot do that. And so we know that as we get our program identified and built out, that over the years, we're going to add staff to that component as to what, our response program looks like. And using these three different lanes and avenues to make sure that we have as much coverage and accessibility for staff that are dealing with anything that they may be dealing with. One of the things that we have here is we have a significant event log that we track, significant events that happen that officers go to and respond to. And one of the things we've implemented with these three, entities, if you will, is a regular review of our significant event log to look and see, what is staff going, what calls have they gone to? Did we go to something where something, pretty bad happened to a child, where these individuals are looking at that log and looking at those calls to where they can flag, they have the ability to flag, hey, let's reach out to this team. Let's look and see what officers went out there. Let's look and see what dispatcher took that call, so we can get with them and we can kind of talk through and kind of have, a debrief, a one-on-one debrief with it to see if there's something that, okay, this person needs some additional resources. They were really impacted by that. Instead of everything just being the most critical of an incident, a shooting or whatnot, is trying to catch some of the more day-to-day incidents and issues and comments that staff deal with and see, and having all three of these entities looking at it from their lens to look and see, hey, all right, this person is a good candidate for this person is a good candidate for that. And growing these out to where, what I envision with this and what my hope and what my goal is at the end of the day, if we have a staff member here that is dealing with something and they need help, that they have at least one person that they have built a relationship with regardless of what category they fall in, where they have somebody that they feel comfortable going to and talking to try to get them to help with that. And I don't ever need to hear anything about it. It's not something where these people come and tell me, hey, chief, this person can't. I don't know about any of this stuff. And I don't need to know unless it's something critical, specific that they are bound to tell me about. It's about the individuals getting the help and the resources that they need. And so trying to build this out to where we have enough resources and we have enough diversity in resources to where people can find somebody to attach to where, whether it's peer support, whether it's chaplain, hey, man, they can tell the person, man, what they're dealing with. And that's really how we're trying to tackle this issue. And so all three of these, we're looking at trainings, we're looking at programs. I know Kia, since she's been here, she's been going to, Riley's unit, Chapel Hill's unit. There's a co-responder training that's going on tomorrow in Raleigh, and Captain Wenzel and Kia are going to that, so we're just looking at all of the resources out there so we can build this out to make sure that we have it. And then the last thing that I'll put up here that I'm going to mention is team building. In the time that I've been here and just the volume of staff members that I've talked to, one of the things that people have noted or I've heard, over and over is just an overall lack of camaraderie, amongst teams. And the way that they described it to me, it wasn't anything that was, I don't like this person or these people don't like me or anything like that. A lot of it had to deal with circumstance that didn't allow for team building. And so some of the things, that are mentioned is one, newer officers coming on board here. All right, it's expensive to live here. So a lot of our officers can't afford to live here in Apex, so they live other places. And so they may live 20, 30 minutes away from here. And you work 12 hours already. So you've been here for 12 hours and you have a take-home car, which is a great luxury to have, but that provides some challenges because, that doesn't really lend a lens to a lot of, after work team building, where you can see from, some of the cop shows and all that, they get together after the tour is over with and go have a couple of drinks and different things like that. Well, you ain't having no drink and driving one of our patrol cars. Like that's not going to happen. And so, that's not factored in. And then when you look at their off days, people with families and they're spread out to where they're 30 minutes away. And so it's not convenient for people to be able to get together and to do things. And so, just a lack of team building was something that was brought up a lot. And so we've been working, schedule wise, to build some of this time in to where like our patrol teams, working through Captain Best, and we'll have our special operations team take over working patrol for like a 2-hour window. We're going to bring that whole team in and just have a lunch with bring the whole team together where they don't have time to do any of those things. And so we're looking to build that out with all the different departments, divisions that we have here in the department, just making sure that we're putting an emphasis, on camaraderie and team building because it's important and the volume at which people have brought it up to me just really shows, that it's something that we have to do a better job at, and that's something that we're working on. And with that, are there any additional questions?
Is the chaplain program totally voluntary?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Chief?
Just a comment, I didn't see anything that I didn't like. I understand you explained everything really well, so everything looks like building toward this team, building toward. A lot of good.
We're trying. We're trying. Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask you about the, something we haven't touched on is the cargo. What? Cargo. Okay, sorry. You talk about, a big part of public safety is not just how many crimes are actually occurring, but it's the perception.
Mhm.
And, what happens with these things is, someone goes to a neighborhood, pulls on a bunch of doors, breaks in a couple of them, people start talking, and all of a sudden, it's a great concern to everyone.
Yes,
Although, I guess on the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge crime compared to violent crime.
But no,
It's still bad.
it's still a problem, and it's one of our biggest problems and biggest challenges.
So I think the question is pretty straightforward. Like you talked about additional patrol officers,
Mhm.
additional traffic officers. Do you have a prescription for help to have Apex better address these crimes, or is it the same prescription as?
So the number one prescription to address that crime is for people to lock their doors. That's the number one thing that will fix that, is because we're not seeing any of those individuals break out windows when they go through neighborhoods. And so it's the education piece is the number one thing in that. And so when we talk about community policing and public safety, there's a small few of us here when you compare us to the masses of the population that we serve. There's 99 of us. There's almost 75,000 people here. Okay. And so we have to get people to understand that they play just as critical a role in public safety and community safety as the officers and the people that work here. And so, when that happens is what are the checks and balances? What is the accountability from neighbor to neighbor of, hey, did you lock up your car tonight? Now we're going to investigate all of that stuff tooth and nail. And we have some other ideas of what we're going to be looking at that will help us address that, especially from a technology base. And we'll be looking to get with the homeowners associations to see, if they're interested in putting up license plate reader cameras, at the entrance, the egress and ingress into some of these subdivisions to where we can track those people and we can find them when we have those things happen. But the biggest thing in the short term fix is just target hardening. is if everybody takes the steps that they need to take to not become a victim of things, then there's less opportunities. And the individuals that are coming here to perpetrate these ills, you know, once they start running into roadblocks and they start coming up empty, then that leads them away. It's like, all right, this community over here, man, they get it, they've learned their lesson, they stop doing that. And so we have to take some ownership and responsibility into that piece and doing our part. And then also, like I said, the biggest thing with that is going to the HOAs and seeing if they're interested in putting up some of those cameras where we can have access to where if somebody does come in here and tries that, regardless of what they break into or if they get into anything, you know, we know about it, we find out about it, we can track them down and we can put their butt in jail.
Hey, Chief, I do want to make one comment that I think is one of the highlights of the department is that you guys really do a great job of maintaining a level of safety around here. I mean, if anybody's got, one of the things that I know that we've all dealt with during this political time of the year is you'll get somebody who will say, oh, I hear about a break-in or a crime that takes place there. And one of the things I always tell people, I'm like, well, hold on, let's take a look. We'll go to the Apex, North Carolina Police Department crime statistics page. It'll show you a map. It'll show you a map where every crime has been committed within the last 30 days. You can go there and find out. And I'm looking at the map right now. I see 30 days. This is the grand sum total of crime. We've had, looks like 2 break-ins of a house, 1 break-in of a building, and 5 car break-ins. That's looking at the last 2 months worth of data. So I think you're doing a great job of limiting that, because what I don't see on there is, violent crime. I don't see a lot of things that people keep saying take place in communities like ours. And I'd like to see you continue to not only keep us safe, but tout the fact that you guys are doing a damn good job of doing it.
Absolutely.
Best staff. I mean, honestly, I deal with this stuff all up and down the East Coast, up and down Eastern Carolina, and I will tell you, there are communities that would kill to have our problems.
Yeah. I'll just add one last thing. I know we got to get moving. One of the things that I'm always focused on, I mean, obviously community safety, but if we don't have safe officers to provide that community safety, then we're in trouble. So maybe the next update, I would like to hear what we're going to enhance the safety of our police officers. Wherever that is.
From an equipment stand? Okay.
And specialized services, whatever.
Okay.
And I think I heard you say you're going to try to do maybe more consistent messaging to the public just about locking the doors. I mean, I know you're doing some of that.
Yes, and it's one of the things, when we talk about capacity and stuff is, we need a PIO, a dedicated PIO for the department, because there's so much information that we need to crank up. Yes, yes.
Make a note.
I am advocating it.
Next budget cycle.
And because, like, all right, some of the people that manage that page are sitting in here right now. So, we all have other duties, responsibilities, and it's hard
So it's a
to
capacity issue.
get, it's the frequency of stuff, because we have so much to talk about and so much information that we need to put out. So that's another thing that we're hoping to get some support from in the near future.
Thank you for that.
So we know what to look for by the scene.
Yes.
That's why I asked numbers.
And can you speak to briefly about current openings? How are we doing there? I know you talked about additional staff, but.
Yeah, so I just came out of a meeting for this one, and so there's 4 officer positions that we were going through the list of applicants that we just got in for that. So we have 4 officer positions right now, but that number is going to be going up after we get the lieutenant stuff done in that critical position.
Any other questions, comments? Chief, thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate everything. Leadership, and everyone here. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We need to take like a 5-minute break. Okay, let's take 5 minutes. Let's come back. Kate, I know you got to get out of here too. And we'll wrap it up with the substance misuse task force.
If you got hard out.
When we put together this work session was to have the mayor substitute task force do a quick update on where we are today. And what's interesting is that we just had a quarterly meeting last week. So this information is presently updated. But I just kind of want to revisit on why this task force exists. And I'll tell you, this wasn't just a Jock Gilbert moment to have his name on a mayor substitute task force. It was really to get the attention of community members to say this mayor is speaking out about problems in our town, which obviously covers not only the county, but the state and the nation. Most of you know we had a total of 107,000 people died of opioid overdose in 2021. And so that is quite a low number. And that poured into our community of APEX. And what I want to do is just kind of highlight the task force members and who we have here today. And then some of the tasks we're attempting to accomplish here, and also some of the, actually the tasks we've accomplished, and then the goals we want to reach in the next year. So I'll say that we had several people that kind of came on board early on, and it was a short counterweight. They were in here and they went out quick. And I believe they had just a different agenda, a different focus than where we were, the task force. But we also have dedicated members who have really stayed the course and allowed us to move forward to where we are today. You may have remembered this, colleagues. We had the update at a council meeting. We had a parent to come in, Diane Stevenson, and she talked about how she lost 2 sons as a result of opioid overdose. And that really hit me because I think everybody here probably knows someone that is experiencing or challenged with this type of issue. It could be your neighbor, it could be a family member. So we need to keep a focus on this. So one of the individuals that has really stayed true to our task force, that's our police officer here at Apex, Victoria Carter. I do want to recognize her dedication and commitment to this program. Also, Erica Asbury, she's right here. And she is a inclusion outreach coordinator at Elias Health. So she's going to be speaking briefly as well to give an update. So I'll turn the floor over to you, Officer Carter.
Okay.
And we'll get moving. Thank you.
So I have been the primary police liaison for 2 years now for the task force. We just recently brought on Kia. So she's going to serve as an additional resource as well because she has more resources than I do. I'm also focused on when officers call me. But if it is a resource that they need immediately, or anything like that, then Kia can assist as well. So currently we have 12 active members on the task force. We also have an additional 6 volunteers that are assisting us with projects that just our full-time members aren't able to fully commit to. You'll see a lot of our volunteers at different events that we host. When, like me, I can't necessarily come to all the task force events that are in town because I'm having to do my own booth as well, because I do all of the community outreach alongside my partner for the police department. So some of our volunteers, we have Abby, who was an active task force member and had to step down. She's working for a college advisory board project. There was one done in the high school, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So it's just where they get a whole bunch of students together and it's an open forum. The students are able to tell us kind of trends that they're seeing, some concerns that they have, just to bring awareness to us. Because none of us are in college right now, so we're kind of seeing like the newer things and things that we might need to address in the high schools or the middle schools, or unfortunately, sometimes we'll have to address in the elementary schools within our own town itself. We have 2 volunteers that are putting together a resource sheet. So it's just for all of the rehabs in the state of North Carolina. So they're putting this together. And it's something that we can all utilize and that I'll have a copy of as well for the police department. So it's just allowing us to see where all these rehab centers are in the state, what insurance they take, in network, out of network, some of the costs. A lot of the holdups that we're noticing with rehabs is that some of them won't take males and females. A lot of them won't take juveniles. So having that resource guide, especially accessible to all of our members and our police officers, is very beneficial because then we're able to say, hey, this one will take a juvenile female, but it's 4 hours away. And the mayor's partner, Holland, he actually works in Asheville Recovery Center. So I personally have sent 2 people to rehab. One was unsuccessful. We have dealt with him numerous times in town. He just doesn't want the help. I hooked him up with Holland. There were some issues there. He chose not to go when we put together a ride for him. One of our members was going to get in their car and drive him and then come right back home. And he just chose not to utilize the help, which a lot of people won't do. And then I had parents come with a guy that we had to deal with on a call. The parents came to me. I called Holland and they were very familiar with him and his mother from just going to church with him. Holland was able to get him into his rehab center, and he is now working there as well. So that is a very successful story for us. Heather is our event volunteer. Kia, you guys already know, you've heard about her. And then Cheryl is assisting us in trying to get curriculum put into the schools. So we'll go down and talk about that a little bit later, but we were approved to get things into the school and a curriculum to talk to students. And unfortunately, like I said, we are trying to get into elementary schools because we're noticing that, you know, these things don't have an age limit. Vapes, things that like marijuana vapes, THC vapes, cocaine, whatever, it does not have an age limit to it. So we are trying to get all of that into the actual schools. The only holdup that we have is we got approved to have the curriculum, but we have to get each principal to approve it. And that can be challenging depending on what school we're trying to get it into.
I know somebody's connected to school. He's right here, but go ahead.
Okay. Moving on to some of the things that we've accomplished in 2022. We had 4 successful events. The teen advisory meeting, which partnering with that, we're trying to make sure that we do the college advisory board project, the fentanyl town hall panel. We had a booth at Peak Fest for educational purposes and kind of just telling people who we are, making sure that they had a face to the task force and they kind of knew who to contact, connecting them with some resources if need be. And then we also put on a community concert at one of the local churches. Officers were provided resource sheets with just different resources that they can contact if they come across somebody, along with utilizing myself. Most officers will contact me, send me an email, ask me to follow up, and then I'm able to then go to other members of the task force. But all of us are accessible to all the officers. We have members that are actively speaking to AA meetings. So they're just providing education as well, providing the same resources that we're doing to everyone in town. And then they're just allowing themselves to be open and vulnerable. So we have someone who is in active recovery, who suffered from alcohol, and he is speaking to these AA meetings. So he's going in, he's sharing his story. He's saying, hey, I am a resource, but also understand that I'm human. I understand what you guys are going through. I went through it too. So if you need me, you can call me. The curriculum that we talked about getting into the schools, our biggest hangup at this point is just making sure that all of the principals are on the same page as us. We're noticing that a lot of people, parents, teachers, principals, whoever you are at Apex, we don't want to admit that there's a problem. And like the mayor said, that was our primary goal for establishing this task force, is to allow people to know, like, hey, we see a problem, we identify it, and we're going to try to make it better. It's not going to happen overnight, but this problem also didn't happen overnight. So it's going to take time, it's going to take resources, it's going to take assistance from everyone. And partnership, especially with the schools, because we are seeing a lot of it happen there. Some of the things that we want to reach in 2023, we're going to go ahead and finish that North Carolina Treatment Center resource sheet, and then make sure that we can get that out to everyone that needs it. We're wanting to expand our social media presence with testimonies and stories. So we do actively post on our Facebook page, but we have noticed in just talking to different people in town that we want to make sure that we're sharing testimonies, because it's easy to say, hey, we're here for you guys. But if we're not allowing people to know that, hey, this is a success story, or this is someone that we came in contact with and we sent them to rehab, or we helped them get into rehab and they're now working at a rehab helping others. And we're allowing people, we're working in the process of trying to get people to do it anonymously. So you don't have to do it with your face. You don't have to do it with your voice. You can just blur it out, whatever the case may be, just so that we're able to actually get real life stories out there. Because that obviously will make it a lot easier to connect with. We touched base earlier in the year about a arrest buddy program. The mayor and I both have a law enforcement background. We felt like it wasn't the safest thing for us to do, to have our members on the task force go out and partner with people that officers have arrested that might need some type of support. So we have so many members and so many resources within our own task force that we're going to see if we can partner with a program who already does this. And I can't remember the name of it, but we have an organization that does this. We're going to see if we can partner with them and just kind of see if there is someone that one of our officers arrests, then we can kind of connect them two together. We can provide the arrestee their information. If they choose to reach out, then they just choose to reach out. And then we also touched base on a training video for officers, just to kind of understand more about the task force, the resources that we have, and that is something that we will touch back on at the beginning of the year and utilize our command staff to see what their thoughts are on that as well. We are looking to find more ways to utilize our volunteers for exposure, get them more out into the field. Like I said, bring those success stories out. We also are looking at trying to see if we want to be a 501c3. I mixed up those two letters and numbers, so don't worry about that. We're just kind of trying to see what the benefits are of becoming a 501c or staying what we are, because we don't want to do anything that's going to ultimately hurt us. And we just want to be able to provide everything that we're able to.
And if I can,
Absolutely.
clarity there. So I think the biggest challenge is, and I think this is a question for Sean, Mr. Berber, excuse me, is having a budget dedicated toward this task force and the outreach and what we're trying to get done. So promotional materials and things like that. So we just need to kind of clarify that. That's something. Thanks.
We are hoping that by the beginning of the first of the year, we're able to finalize at least getting into one Wake County school. It kind of like a domino effect. So if one person sees that, you know, this principal in this school in APAC decided that they were going to allow this curriculum to be brought in, then they may say, hey, come to us, come to our administration, kind of go through the curriculum with us, and let's see if you want to bring it in our schools. Again, it is going to shine light and say, hey, they're teaching this, so they must have a problem. But we're looking at it more so as there may be a problem, but we're trying to take preventative measures. So we're not necessarily shining light on any issues that your school may have. We're just trying to let the public know and the parents know that, hey, this may be happening, but these are the steps that we want to take. A question that was brought up in our last meeting last week was, should we look into adding a faith-based outreach subcommittee? So much like Chief Armstrong was talking about, where we have a chaplain, we wanted to know if we wanted to do something like that with us. Not necessarily a chaplain, but maybe partner with different organizations and say, hey, you know, I am struggling with this, but I feel like I want to go to church and do this. And then we could reach out to someone that's able to provide those type of resources to them. And then our primary goal, that is just going to be an ongoing goal, this is never going to stop, is just going to be to continue to connect with the community with hope. Before we go on, the tip pick, does anyone have any questions?
I had a question about the curriculum. Is that something you all developed, or is it been vetted by any organization, or does it come from a different organization?
Sure. So we had a parent, a very passionate parent who lost a child as a result of a drug overdose, and she had worked with some members of Wake County Schools to put something together, curriculum. So it's kind of just part, and I think was part because we got into the game late. So it was finalized around July this year. So that would be a quick turnaround. So I think our goal is to try to make this work for 23 and see if we can get it.
You talk about this curriculum, what does it entail? Is it like you go into a classroom that exists and someone gives a talk? Like I remember when I was a kid, there was DARE, you know,
Yeah.
the DARE, is it like that?
Yes.
Is it,
So it's more,
is that gone, by the way, there?
it's still around in some places, but
Okay.
it's not.
It's not in Wake County.
Okay.
I think Wake County Sheriff's Office still does it, but yeah, so that's the thing, is having I don't know how many weeks, I gotta go back and look, but it's just a way to get inside the classrooms to break the stigma. That's what we're trying to break. So we believe that stigma is killing more people. Because people are afraid to get help. They see that they're in an environment that they don't want to be in, talking about students. So we want them to be able to share that information so they can get help to their families. So that's part of it. And we believe one of the reasons why we can't get it into is because it's just one of those things where people just don't want to acknowledge there's an issue in the schools. And I know I get calls all the time as mayor, this is going on at high school or at Friendship. And I know you guys are aware of SRO, so we're just trying to make sure that we break light so we can get people help. That's all we want.
Do you think there's friction from acknowledging the problem
Yes,
from people in the community?
I do agree. That's it.
What do you think about maybe doing a dinner or something, inviting all the principals and assistant principals? Having this as a discussion point to bring up as, you know, hey, this is an issue. These are the statistics, these are the ages that we're seeing with this.
We had I did a meeting in my office. We had 2 principals that came in, local principals, and fully supported. But they had to run the flagpole, so that's what we are. And one of the other things we talked about in our last meeting was we believe this would be just really an easy thing to do. There's many success stories which will come out in the latest stats that Victoria will point out, but in Narcan, and having that readily available in schools. And we know SROs carry it, but in the event that they're not around, can the staff grab it and administer that in the event of a situation? So we started those conversations as well. So we'll get some progress.
So you guys are fully aware, the only Narcan in the schools are the ones that our officers carrying. So we are working to try to make sure that we do get Narcan in there so that every faculty member can utilize that. But like the mayor said, if our officers are at a different campus, if they're doing traffic control, there's no Narcan on the streets.
Yeah, I think that sounds tough, because I know that, like, just from my experience, like, the employees in the school can't even give my kids Advil.
Right.
Right, like there's state laws, all sorts of health regulations here. So imagine giving someone Narcan is gonna be a big deal,
Sure.
you know?
The Narcan now also has a QR code on the back that will dispatch crisis directly to wherever it's dispensed. So as soon as you pull it out, you can scan a QR code, pop it and give it, and then someone will come to that spot immediately.
I think the difference with this Narcan as well is that you can give it to a person who's not experiencing an overdose and doesn't harm.
Right.
So it's very low even with the use of it.
One last piece I wanted to ask about is when you mentioned funding. I have some information, but I have not read it yet in terms of the county gotten funding from the opioid settlement. I don't know if there would be any funding through that or not. And do you all know?
It hasn't been determined yet how they're gonna allocate it fully. But there were categories based on the opioid summit meeting. And then there was a hierarchy of how the money would be spent. But it has not been formally allocated yet.
And I'll say that comes back to the 501c3 thing. It's like, you have to get the funds, there has to be something that physically exists to write a check to. You know, you can't just write a check to, you know, easy kind of people. It has to be a corporate entity of some sort.
So really quickly, I know you guys wanted to know about some stats going on. So 2021 versus 2022, we had a total of 26 overdoses that were notated in our system. Of those 26, some resulted in death, some were just overdoses, and they were overdoses of any type, so not just opioids. So someone might think that they're overdosing on alcohol, Tylenol, Benadryl, things like that. In 2021, the PD itself, 4 Narcan dosages were administered. 3 of those were single dosages, so on 3 separate calls. One of those was a double dose on the same scene. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they had to use 2 on me. It could have been 1 on me, 1 on the mayor. But more than likely, it probably was 2 on the same person. Also in 2021, 3 dosages were administered by EMS, 3 by the fire department, and 1 by other. But it is important to note that these are just ones that were documented in our reports. So they're not documented. So say 36 were actually administered by EMS. If they're not documented in our reports, then we can't run that as a stat. But if it is administered by us, we do have to document that. So 4 were in 2021 compared to the 22 overdoses to date. In this year, the same thing. Some of them were deaths, some of them were just overdoses, and the person survived. 3 so far have been administered by officers. 1 was a double dose, which again is 2 on scene. And then 2 were single dosages. 4 were administered by the fire department, and 5 were notated as being administered by EMS.
Any questions for Officer Carter?
Thank
Thank you so much.
So my name is Erica Asbury. I am credentialed to do drug and alcohol counseling, CADC, and I, prior to moving to North Carolina, was an investigator, so I have a law enforcement background. Here, I worked here and in New Jersey. I worked in Camden County Vicinage, which, if you know, at the time was the highest crime rate in New Jersey. Here and there, I have worked in crisis mental health. So I was on the phone, responded to crisis calls for 6 years here. And in doing the DUI assessments and the assessments with families, I can tell you that stigma is a huge issue. I have worked with very, very affluent families, very, very affluent people who choose to pay to have a meeting and an assessment in a faraway land, in a faraway room with no one else, when they could be in group for a third of the cost because they don't want anyone to know what happened. I met with a young man who came to an assessment. I was doing assessments upstairs. His family was downstairs. When he got up there and I turned around, his lips were like blue. I refused to do an assessment. I explained to his, went downstairs, explained to his family, he needs to go to the ER right now. This young man is already far beyond just getting a typical assessment so that he can get out of his probation or whatever it was. His mother looked at me and said, no, it will be an embarrassment to our family. I told her I'm going to fill out my documentation. I'm going to submit it to the judge and I'm going to explain exactly what happened in this moment. And I did. 3 days later, their beautiful mansion was raided. Tons of cop cars. Everyone was out there. Now, what was a greater sadness and embarrassment to their family? Taking him to the emergency room to get an assessment and getting him the treatment, or to have their precious home raided and be all over the newspaper. There are ways for us to help intervene in these cases and to reduce the stigma just by the intervention in advance. One of the things that we have talked about on the task force, or I really want to stress this one, is thank you. Thank you to the mayor. Thank you to the city council for endorsing it. The people who are on the task force are already, that were vetted, are experts, people who are lending their expertise. These are not people who are coming to build their resume. They're coming here to truly, truly, truly help. What has come out of it, one of the things that was mentioned was the teen summit. The youth that came that day and spoke about either their issue or the statistics that they gathered or made recommendations to the mayor are currently speaking in other places, representing Apex. Even if they aren't families who live here, they are representing that teen summit. One of which will be speaking at the 4-H mental health event about her own experience. The mayor's task force has a little heart stress ball. The stress ball I gave out last week to some individuals who have intellectual developmental disabilities who are adults and would otherwise, during their anxiety moments, self-medicate. And self-medicate is a nice way of saying smoke marijuana. Okay? You have options to do other things. A lot of young people are choosing to self-medicate, but if we can teach those coping skills, and most people have thought, oh, a stress ball, no big deal. But when you learn a coping skill and you have something to do other than reach for marijuana, it makes a difference. So what you're investing in is changing the lives of young people, not just in Apex, but in Wake County and in North Carolina. I also wanted to mention the Post Center. When we're talking about what we're thinking about doing in advance, if you're not familiar with the Post Center that is in Raleigh, they offer substance misuse programs, one of which they would like to bring here. And we have other sponsors. There's a minimal cost of having it come, but they set up a room like a typical bedroom, and then they have individuals walk through it and see where things are hidden. For example, when I walk through, they have water bottles, like containers like this that are hollow, that then have whatever substance, alcohol, et cetera, in it. They had a flip-flop that was filled with alcohol. They have posters where the little sticky on the back is actually a drug, all kinds of stuff like that. So they bring it to the town and they allow it. It's usually under semi-festive reasons. And then families and individuals can walk through and test themselves. We would very much like to do that under the task force. And then last thing. Oh, it was the Narcan that we could help support. Healing Transitions is the agency that has the Narcan with the QR code, but it can be replicated, and we certainly can link up with them to have that.
Any questions for Erica?
I was just wondering if you all had connected with Healing Transitions. It's important.
And I would say too, the goal of getting the Narcan in the schools is actually was presented by a gentleman named Eddie McCormack. He works with HIDA. And he said it's a trend out west. Okay, so they're getting the schools out west and it's working its way here. So we kind of want to support the schools starting here in Apex, and hopefully that will be a trend to carry out to other schools. So hopefully we get it to work out.
And certainly just like with the health equipment, wherever the life-saving equipment would be in school, not necessarily every teacher, every classroom having an Narcan, but in a typical place where you would house other life-saving equipment, then we can have it there if approved. And the reason why I have sneakers on is because someone told me I'm casual.
You're fine. You're good to go. You're good to go. All right. That's our update. I just want to again extend my appreciation to all those that task force. They give a lot of time. You know, what's mentioned about professionals going to task force, but we also have people in recovery. I think that helps us remain successful. Thank you very, very much for all you did. So that's the only thing I have on the agenda. Any other business we discussed before our turn to meeting?
I just want to say, once again, thanks to your leadership on this issue. It's an incredibly valuable issue, and it's doing a lot to help destigmatize something that more people want to run and hide from, but we've got to recognize it. If you don't recognize it, we can't address it. So thanks for your leadership on that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to all of you.
All right.